Welcome to the Bagel Logic Podcast, the show where Papa Thom spreads wisdom like a smear of cream cheese on an everything bagel. Here's your host, Thom Jennings.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bagel Logic Podcast. I'm your host, Thom Jennings, and first and foremost, I just want to thank everybody out there for listening. If you have the opportunity to share, maybe write a nice review, give me however many stars, whatever platform you're listening onto, the show is worthy of. And today we have another guest. This is very exciting. I mentioned a few that we had on the last show, and there were some that I forgot to mention. I don't ever forget them as people, but yeah, there's a lot of shows in the archives if you want to get back and listen to some of those guests. Today, that's right, last episode I didn't have a guest. And
no.
What the heck was that about, Larry? It was about
dad.
Oh, right.
Being a dad.
Lack of dads was the
lack of dads
was the last episode. So we haven't shied away from any controversial subjects, but a listener, a friend, somebody that I haven't seen in a long time because he lives in another part of the country, which seems to be a prevailing theme of Western New Yorkers somehow flying away like seagulls in the winter and then never coming back. Larry Snider III. Larry, welcome to the program. Tell the world about Larry Snider III. Can I call you the third or three?
The third. I take pride in that, so that's, always a good thing. So I grew up in Western New York. I know a lot of the listeners probably don't know where Leroy is. I know you do, but I went there until, kindergarten. Then I moved to the great town of Albion,
Ooh.
Orleans County, yes. And I graduated from there. That's one of the things I can say I did. Graduated.
Well, yeah, you got one on me there because I never graduated high school with a traditional diploma. I had to wait till I was 28 and get a GED, and I don't even know that their GED's a lot different than when I had to go get it. I mean, I was lucky enough where I could get. I think I got really drunk the night before, didn't study at all, and I still passed it. So that's not a reflection on my intelligence. In fact, if anything, it's stupid to get drunk before you take a test that's going to get you a high school diploma. I think it's a reflection on how easy the test was back then.
Oh, yes. So, I feel there's two kinds of Western New Yorkers. There's the ones that love snow. They love all things Western New York and want to stay there forever. And then there's people that as soon as they graduate high school and or college, they're like, peace out, never want to see you again. I hate the snow. I hate the politics. Those are the other type of people. And I kind of feel like I'm in that second group. But I have a lot of patience, so I, try to wait it out as much as possible.
So where do you're living in North Carolina now? Is that where you are?
Yep.
Okay.
So Greensboro, High Point. I probably live like 15 minutes from High Point University, which is, I guess, a big deal. And it's interesting. North Carolina's a nice amalgamation of Southerners and Northerners. So there's a lot of people from either Western New York, Rochester, or Long Island that have moved down here because houses are cheap comparatively, and it's the same kind of culture, and it's a college town, so it's, nothing too, I want to say rednecky, because the South does have that reputation.
Yeah, but you're not really the deep South. I mean, I think that most people, when they think of the real rednecks, they think of like Alabama or Mississippi and maybe certain parts of Georgia. I mean, Atlanta is very metropolitan and whatnot, but there's the Carolinas. I mean, North and South Carolina, there's definitely that Southern thing about them. In Virginia, I don't necessarily think redneck. When I think of those areas, those people talk really slow and they're all incredibly nice. That's all I think of.
So it's really surprising because North Carolina is definitely like the north of the two, and South Carolina is definitely the more rural, set in their ways, unless you're going to like Myrtle Beach, but that's completely different because that's a tourist area. But all the people I've met from South Carolina are very old school, 7 years behind the time at some point, So it's interesting. So that's why I like North Carolina. It's a lot more. I associate with a lot of people that have moved or are a little bit more progressive, I guess I could say.
So what you're saying is that you're telling every Western New Yorker, anyone who's ever come from Leroy, which is the land where Jell-O was invented, which you didn't mention,
Oh, yeah.
kind of, that's their big claim to fame. You're saying they should just get the heck out and say, get away from the snow, folks. Come to North Carolina because there's plenty of us here already.
Listen, if you're gonna move out of Western New York, move to North Carolina, unless you like it really hot, and then you can just move, to Florida But it's a little much for me.
Yeah, this episode has been brought to you by the North Carolina Chamber of Commerce. So yes,
Come join us.
Come join us.
So it's interesting because being from Western New York. So little side tangent. We moved the winter after Winter Storm Jackknife, which, as you know, in a lot of Western New York, it was awful. It snowed 8 foot in 24 hours. And after that, we're like, peace out. Like, I'm not dealing with that. But then it's like, I found out a lot of people I either went to college with or knew around the, Batavia, Rochester area, have now embraced North Carolina as the Western New York home. Like there's Buffalo Bills fans, there's people that love Zweigel's hot dogs and garbage plates. Like it's a thing down here. So it almost feels like home. It's just hotter in the summer.
Yeah. I lived in Vegas for a very short period of time and they had a bar at the end of the street from where I lived that served Genesee beer and Zweigel's and all that. I think every town probably has a bar that's dedicated to most major areas, but it's nice. I guess it's kind of literally a taste of home when you get some of your home foods. But I don't know. If you listen to the episode with Josh Kolgavan, it was like he's very well. He's really embraced Medina, and I respect that. Mm-hmm. I've got family here. I think that's why people stay here. So I mean, was there any considerations in terms of when you had to leave the area that you were leaving anybody behind or anything behind that you've never really replaced?
So, yeah. One of the things we have in common, which I'm sure we'll talk about all the other things, is our job working at the Mead Bar. And that was one of the things that I was kind of bummed about because love working there, love the interaction. And Medina has come a long way from when I grew up. Growing up in Albion, they were the rival. They were the hated town. And then it's like now that I grew up and it's like, wow, Medina's actually better than Albion, which is like, usually wouldn't ever say that, but Medina has become like this town that if I come and visit Western New York, I want to go there because it's got so much to offer. And the people have come along. It's not the same as it was, 25 years ago. It's really revolutionized. And so I miss that. And it's, kind of weird to say that I miss Medina.
Yeah. And for those listening that aren't familiar with the area, it's near Rochester and Buffalo and actually dab smack in between two metropolitan areas, but they're both very rural towns and canal towns, so Erie Canal. Mm-hmm. And but yeah, their histories over the last 15 years have been divergent. I mean, I'd say 15 years ago, they both suffered the fate of a lot of small towns in upstate New York when all the factories closed, along the Rust Belt and everything. And they just went into this depressive state, and a lot of rundown buildings, a lot of unoccupied historic buildings, but still retain this beautiful character. And Albion still has the buildings; they just don't have any businesses. And Medina somehow managed to have this cultural renaissance. And Larry and I met at A10 Meadworks, which is a place that comes up, like you said, a lot of times on the podcast because I still work there. And that's, I don't know. You were working. At the time, you were working with Brian directly making mead, correct? You were like his assistant mead maker? Or?
No, I was not. I volunteered. Tim was doing that pretty exclusively besides the pottery thing. He did that. So I was just, the personal high-energy mead slinger.
Yeah.
And I did you got the bands, and I ran sound for the bands.
Yes. In fact, one of the things that I will never forget is our first meeting was when we were working with a guy named Elliot Lewis from Hall & Oates.
Oh, yeah.
And he had this spec sheet where he sent it to us, and it was all this requirements for his sound equipment, and it was this really complex thing. And Brian, the owner of Meadworks, is like, but this is what we got, so this is what we're going to use. So Elliot shows up, and he sees this old sound system that had cat hair all over it. Like, it's just covered in cat hair. And he has this look of disdain, like, I can't believe it. Here I am, the keyboardist to Hall & Oates. I played at Madison Square Garden, so I'm going to be in this place with a sound system with cat hair. And then you put one of the speakers up on I don't even know what the heck you put it up on, but I just remember the thing falling in the middle of the show. Do you remember that? The thing just falls flat on its face in the middle of the show. And the look that Elliot gave me was classic. But, we're still friends, me and Elliot Lewis. So we survived that whole incident. But my God, I remember going back, and he was on the phone to his manager or his booking agent. And he was just ripping him one, just like, I can't believe that I got this sound system. But when you met, like when you hung out with him in person, he was very relaxed, and he definitely enjoyed the crowd. But the cat hair covered sound system it's still there. Well, no, actually.
The problem though was like, it's like, hey, by the way, this is what I need, like whatever, how many a day before the show.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay, we'll see what we can get, kind of thing. Man, running sound for that was always an interesting experience because it's like sometimes you'd be like, oh yeah, we got this, we're good. And then other times be like, okay, nothing is going right. Especially more on the outdoor shows was always fun.
Yeah, well, that was an old mixer, and I mean, it's still there, and all the contacts were dirty. So every time you turned the volumes up and everything, it crackled. And it was just but that's
the joys of a sound guy.
Yeah,
that happens.
Yeah, but it's part of the character of the venue too. It's the stories that you remember. I mean, if the speaker hadn't fallen over, I mean, we wouldn't be talking about that now, other than like, oh my God, it was such a perfect day. That was one of the most memorable moments there. So I know you touched on it. I don't want to back up too much, but that's what I do, I guess. So you mentioned earlier that, Larry Snider III, you're very proud of the third. So tell me about 1 and 2. I mean, I was curious about that. My dad was a Thomas. I'm a Thomas, and my son's a Thomas. So I kind of understand the connections and how there's some importance to that. So I'm just curious to hear what your 1 and 2 are.
Yeah. So 1 is my grandpa, have a lot of respect for him, born in 1925, and worked hard his whole life. He just finally, like 5 years ago, he's like 96, if I can do math. Wait, 25. No, 97. He's 97, so he just retired 5 years ago from doing beef cattle, which was his other job. So I was like, man, if you're in your 90s and you're still doing it, and he's just like, oh, I just got too tired and I didn't really want to wake up early in the morning anymore. And it's like, okay, that's awesome. So my grandpa, number 1. My number 2, that is my Uncle Steve. So my middle name is Steven. And he did not want to be called Junior, and he did not want to be called Lawrence. So he just picked the middle name. And people think it's weird. They're like, wait, I thought it's, supposed to go like straight down. I'm just like, no, it's generational. So I am the third generation of Lawrence Stephen Snider. And so Uncle Steve, he was like the joker of the family, to the point of obnoxiousness sometimes. And by sometimes, I mean pretty much most of the time. We liked him when, we were kids because we didn't care. But once we became adults, a lot of us were like, dude, it's getting old. Like we're 22. Your little sarcasm jokes and jabs aren't appreciated, nor are they funny because we've heard them our entire lives.
You sound like my kids. Just saying.
So, but like when anytime people said my name and they're like, oh, Larry Snider, or, when I was younger, Lawrence Snider, it's like, oh, I'm the third. And they're like, oh, okay. And I don't know if it's a generational thing, but it's like, I like my family for the most part. And I think I take pride that my grandpa was good. And maybe from the opposite end, I learned a lot of what not to say from my uncle. So I'm like, yep, I'm the third one. I'm definitely the weirdest one. Obviously, if you didn't know, for a long time I was they called Black Sheep 3. That was like my nickname for some of my cousins. Not that they didn't like me, but like I was definitely not the normal Snider kid.
Yeah, that 1, 2, 3 thing. I know the official. I think the official thing is if it's first, middle, last, because my dad had a different middle name than me, and then my son has a different middle name than either of us. So I nickname him T3, and because he's the third Tom, but he's not technically a Roman numeral 3. But I didn't realize that you could go off the beaten path, so to speak, in terms of having an uncle instead of a dad. So what's your dad's name?
David.
Oh.
Yeah. And it's weird because I learned, if you skip more than, I think it's 3 generations, you're supposed to start over again. But usually you don't. So like, even if it was like, if my great-great-grandpa was named Lawrence Stephen, I would still be, like if I was the second, I'd still be the second if that were the case.
So you have kids, right?
I do, yes.
No Larrys?
My wife Nixat.
Really?
Like the first, yeah. I was like, hey, what are we gonna name the fourth? And she just gave me the look of death. I'm like, nope, that's not happening. I don't know if I want to do that because at the time when we were living in Western New York, we would regularly hang out with family. So like if we had, again, 3 Larrys at a family gathering, it could get confusing. So I didn't really want to do that. I mean, I was thinking like, it was kind of a joke, like, oh yeah, that would be cool, the fourth, because, you always see that in like yearbooks. It's like, oh, their parents really like that name a lot.
Yeah, I feel like you got to be royalty to get to like the 9th and 10th. You don't see a lot of, like, you see 50 some odd Super Bowls, but you don't see like Larry Snider the 53rd.
No,
but that would be pretty cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there was a guy when I did pest control. He was a 5th.
Yeah, and
it was like, is that right? And it's like, yep, he's and like it was but it's one of those families that takes their names like super serious. Like, we're gonna name our firstborn son the same name.
I'm gonna have to look up and see what the longest number of Roman numeral name is, like the most generational in a row before somebody's wife put down their foot and said, "Enough is enough. We're not having a Larry Snider the 53rd."
Yeah, I've heard of a 7th. That's probably the highest I've ever heard of, like personally. Yeah. But that's not, and they weren't royalty.
Yeah, I'm not royalty. I know that. My grandmother used to tell us we were royalty, but my grandma used to, I guess, tell us a lot of stories that were not necessarily true. So who knows? But that was a little bit of family folklore. Maybe that'll be a full episode, family folklore. So, I know we're in contact every now and then about the podcast, and I really appreciate the feedback. And I don't think I've ever talked to anybody about the actual podcast itself. So would you mind giving me some feedback and some thoughts, favorite episodes and things like that?
Yeah. So like, again, you are my second favorite podcast ever. And it's a big deal because, my favorite podcast is, a modern rock history podcast, which as a 90s kid, I take very much pride in that. But you are my second favorite podcast. Well, let's bring up, because I was like, I'm going to write down notes about my favorite podcast. Did I write notes? I did. Do I know where they are? No.
Yeah, I gave up. When I first started doing this podcast, but before I go any further, thank you for that compliment of being your second favorite. I mean, that's really cool. And because a lot of times you do these things, you don't know if anybody's even listening. And but I'm very fortunate that I do get feedback, good, bad, and indifferent. And the bad, you need the bad with the good, and you need the mediocre stuff too. But I tried to do the whole notes thing, and I think that like the podcasts that I listen to that I really enjoy are the ones that don't sound so scripted. But I also like things. You're saying you're like a modern rock podcast, so there's certain podcasts that I like that deal with music or history or things like that are scripted. But I don't know if I could do that. I don't know if I have the attention span to just stay that focused for a really strict. I think I have the voice for it, but I don't think I have the patience for it.
And what was cool about that one is the guy that has been doing it for 50 years or something like that. And he's a well-respected guy. So he knows what he's doing. He's got his format down. It used to be on radio, and now it just switched to podcast because, that's the modern world. But you have your was it Tuesdays, your vinyl?
Yeah, Turntable Tuesday with Thom. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Or is that? Yeah.
And I tried to put it on YouTube, and I'm very self-conscious, which may seem weird because I do so much like the video and all that other stuff, but I obsess over numbers. And if I don't get a certain amount of listens or views, I get really, really upset and take it very personally, like I'm a horrible human being. So with Facebook, I can get a semi-decent amount of views on Turntable Tuesday, but when I put it up on YouTube, I'd get like 4 or 5, and I'd just be like, This is horrible. I want to eat worms, that kind of stuff. But YouTube is their algorithm is quirky. I'll say that. As friends that have gone on YouTube, and then other podcasts I listen to, as far as the integration, it starts out slow, and then all of a sudden you could just blow up out of nowhere. Yeah.
And
it's all very quirky. It's very hard to maneuver because, especially in a podcast, a lot of stuff I read says, oh, you should put the full episodes up on YouTube in addition to your podcast platforms, which I do, but the YouTube stuff doesn't, I don't get anything in terms of that. I still get a lot of, actually my number one, I think it goes iTunes, then Spotify in terms of listens. But if you try to put anything up on Facebook about a podcast, they'll, for whatever reason, they'll just shut it right down. Nobody will see it. We just did a pilot episode, myself and another person. I think you probably know Crystal, Tim Elliott's ex-wife.
I've known her a long time.
Yeah, so we did like this advice column thing called Emita, which is Am I the Asshole? And then we go through some Reddit stuff and whatnot. And but we put up a link to the pilot episode. Nobody saw it, and I think we got 8 listens, and I'm just like, man, I mean, I don't want to pay for ads to Facebook unless I'm generating ad revenue. You know, I mean, as much as you love to spend money on stuff like that, you don't want to just spend money to lose money. I already do that making bagels, so.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to visit your bagel shop.
Yeah, when are you coming back up, by the way?
I'm hopefully in the fall. That's the plan. We already have our summer trip planned, which is I've been married for 10 years, so we're taking a cruise in August. I've never been cruising before, but it'll be fun.
Yeah.
But in the fall, I'm hoping like probably late October.
Yeah.
So if you're still in business.
Wow. I mean, that's legit though. There's days I look at it and go, I ain't doing this crap. I mean, it's like with the podcast. One day I could just go, taking my ball and going home. I'm not doing this anymore if nobody's going to listen. But as I said, we've been very fortunate. So, but what is it? I mean, I know the one time you reached out to me about the episode, I think on churches, which is actually one that I received a lot of feedback on. I was very surprised about that, honestly.
Like,
and,
well, I mean, it's anytime controversy comes up, you tend to get a lot more feedback. But it resonated with me because, I guess I don't want to say we're on the opposite end of spectrums, but you grew up Catholic, sort of.
Oh, I definitely grew up Catholic. There's no sort of about it.
Like, I was like, well, because like you said, you went to like a couple of different churches. So I'm like, is he grow up Catholic? There's growing up Catholic, and then there's like, I just went to a Catholic church.
Yeah, I mean, as an adult, I never really spent any I never joined a parish as an adult. So when I was actually a member of churches. Oh my goodness, I had Baptist. It was like a Southern Baptist church where they did the whole adult baptism. And it's funny because my son Tom always talks about how terrified he was to see me get dunked in this big pool. And he was too young to really comprehend what the heck was going on. And then I did Lutheran, which was like Catholic light. I mean, I like that. And then Free Methodist. So, you know.
Yeah, and that's what we have in common. So, like, I grew up in a Free Methodist church. My wife grew up in a Free Methodist church. So, I mean, until probably my early 20s, you know, I've been a Free Methodist. And my dad didn't get saved till I was 19. So that was like, my dad wasn't really a churchgoer. But my mom was. My mom's from the South, so church and a quote unquote religion is a big deal. But yeah, I grew up a church kid. I've always been a church kid. I'm still a church kid. And so like that's whatever 40 years of my life. But I've always had issues with the way the church ran, and not just financially, but also how they treat the weirdos or the people that don't fit into the mold. And so me and the wife were listening to you, and it's like, oh man, like it's nice that people talk about it, because a lot of times it doesn't get talked about. Or it just gets casually mentioned and then never talked about again. But I'm like, yes, I've gone to a lot of different type of churches, like from, again, especially down in the South, we went to a Baptist church for a while. And also we've gone to Pentecostal churches.
Ooh, yeah, I did that. I did the Pentecostal thing.
And my wife grew up going to a lot of different type of churches because, like, you know, a subject would be brought up and then they'll be like, you guys can't go here anymore.
Yeah.
That's awful.
It's, you know, I get it, and I don't get it. You know, like, I feel like I feel like if you're going to have a church, sure, you have to have standards, you have to have rules. So as I mentioned in that one episode, and we had an associate pastor, I mean, he was having a sexual affair with the wife of one of the board members. I mean, you can't continue to work. I mean, you can't continue to work in most like normal places, much less a church, which is supposed to be on some level a lighthouse of morality, I guess, for lack of a better term that's going to pop into my head. But that episode, I actually had somebody come to me. He was an older gentleman, in his early 70s. And he said he attended the same church that we were at. And it's one I think you and I both attended at some point. You went to Free Methodist in Albion.
Yep.
And he said, "Oh, I didn't know any of that stuff that was going on, and I wish I had at the time." And he said, that was almost worthy of a sermon. Like, people that go to church should hear that, and that was kind of my intention, because I think maybe the twist at the end that people were surprised about was, it's like, no, I'm not anti-church. I'm actually kind of depressed that I can't feel welcomed in any church. Like you said, there's always my experience has been, cliques. And when you say the weirdos, it's, I mean, in reality, the church should be just a bunch of weirdos, because it's people that are seekers, that are seeking comfort, that are seeking community, all those things that we find in music. You listen to a modern rock podcast because modern rock, there's other modern rock fans, and you feel comfortable in that community. So it's weird it's just weird to me that churches, and I guess I admire you for still being able to stick it out, but yeah, I just don't understand the lack of, I guess, I don't know, what's the word, evangelism, where they're just really trying to bring in new people and grow the church. It seems that churches get to a point where they're comfortable, and then they just turn into everything else, where they're just worried about outsiders. Like the United States of America, we're all worried about Mexicans. It's like, well, hey folks, hate to tell you, if you open up a history book, we kind of came here and there were Native Americans here. There's always going to be new people coming in, and things change and skin tones change and all that stuff. And we sort of were founded on that, and we should embrace that. But I feel like churches are the same way. They're like, well, this is our core group. This is what we all look like. This is our color. This is our philosophy. And if you don't fit that mold, then you're not going to feel real comfortable. Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like, it's interesting because, you interviewed Crystal, and I actually met Crystal, back when she was I don't even know if she was a teenager at that time, but I'm just like, there was a church thing for kids, and her and her sister came. And so that was the first time I met her. And she was like that, spitball, full of energy, fire. I mean, obviously she's a redhead, so that happens, but and she's never changed. She's been like that way her whole life. And even when, they had breaststrokes and even raising the kid, it's like, oh man, you're the same person. It's like, oh, I remember you, like, whatever, 20 years ago, so church has been this weird, I don't want to say a social thing, but like, I've met a lot of people that are near and dear to me through church. Not necessarily do all of them still go to church, but they're still good friends or important to me. So it's kind of weaved in and out of my life in different ways. So I appreciate, I just wish they could do better.
Yeah.
But I wish that for America too. So
yeah, I see. And I'm not a passive guy. Like, I can't just be the dude that just goes to church, sits in pew, and throws money in the collection plate, goes home. I've got to do something. But I think that the problem you run into in those situations is that there's always people that feel like you've stepped on their toes, and then that's where you start to have the problem. So it's like the more active you become, the bigger chance you have of having problems. And that to me seems very contradictory. But I deal with that. Honestly, I deal with that at my job. I think that one of the strangest lessons I've learned by age 55 is at my current job, I don't volunteer to be on any committees. I don't stay after work. I don't show up early. I just stay the heck out of everybody's way. And you know what? To date, this has worked out better for me than almost any other job because I don't have to deal with the politics or the gossip or any of the nonsense. Yeah. But the flip side to that is when they all go out for happy hour on a Friday night after work, they don't even invite me because I'm not part of the crew. So it's a give and take. And I mean, I've said I feel the same, very, very similar in dealing with churches. And as bizarre as it is, like I get more communal experience in a bartending than I ever did working in a church, which I don't know, seems a little weird, doesn't it? On some level.
It does. I feel that it depends on, again, I don't want to say it depends on your personality, but I'm a very outgoing person. I love people. I don't delve too much into like getting to know people on a super deep level because I don't want to be disappointed, and B, it doesn't necessarily matter for most relationships. I mean, if you want to have like a best friend or like really close friend, you'll get to know people. But for the most part, I don't need to delve too much into who a person is to get along with them. And with bartending, you can do that. There's regulars, and you'll slowly get to know a little bit more about them, but it's not like a deep dive where you're like, come tell me about your life. And church is sometimes the complete opposite, where some people share too much. And which brings me to like another of my favorite episodes was the abortion one. And even within the church, that is a very controversial subject. And my issue, and you've talked about it a lot, is that things aren't that simple. Like there's not just two sides to every issue. And the problem with polarization, and it seems the modern world of politics, and it seems everything, that people pick sides. There's one of two sides. And there is a huge gray area that never gets addressed nor discussed. And that's just it makes things worse for all the people that can't pick sides. Because I'm a centrist on pretty much everything. So,
yeah, and you know
politics.
most centrists just stay out. They just don't care, and that's where but that's almost by design in modern politics as far as strategy. Is they polarize. They figure what they'll do is they'll disenfranchise the middle. The middle used to decide elections in this country. There was a long period of time where you had to be a centrist. You had to be a centrist to be put on the Supreme Court because you had to get 60 votes instead of just a clear majority, which meant that you at least had to pull a few moderates over from the other side. We don't have that anymore. In terms of the Electoral College, that's been completely gamed, where the majority doesn't even matter. The Senate, it doesn't matter majority either because it's 2 per state. So really, it's become the politics of polarization. But you're right, it's not. And even the word choices, it's so it's so well thought out, and yet we all fall for it. I think I may have mentioned on that abortion thing. It's like who is anti-baby? Like we all love babies. Who wants to kill a baby? When you put it in terms like that, who can be pro-abortion or pro-choice or whatever you want to call it? But like you said, there's so many gray areas and there's so many things, so many nuances that come up that. How can a church be supportive of a young lady who's even contemplating an abortion if they've automatically vilified her for even considering it? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's like that with life in general, like, fatherhood. So I just ordered a t-shirt that says vasectomies prevent abortion.
Ah, yes. You sent me a picture of that.
Yeah. And it's like one of those things where it's like, this is it's a cheaper alternative. It's cheaper than most birth control pills. It's reversible. It's like all these things where I'm just like, you don't understand why this is an option, besides control, but that's a whole nother conversation. It's like you want things to be better, and then just no one makes the choice to make things better.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is where I kind of am in a weird spot myself. So I used to attend all these seminars about, birth control and all this other stuff. And when I was 14, 15 years old, I went to a very progressive high school. And I mean, I had full access to birth control. I mean, there was no reason that I should have been part of making a child at age 16. It just was illogical. But, hormones said one thing, brain said the other. But it's I mean, on some level, it's like there used to be this joke that a friend of mine had. He said, "Oh, they got this 7-step program to stop drinking." He goes, "I got a 1-step program. Step 1, stop drinking." But you're right. It's not always that. But what's weird about that is because it really is that simple. Like if you stop drinking, you don't have a drinking problem anymore. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. If you don't want to have an abortion, don't get pregnant. Like don't make a stupid choice to not use birth control and have sex with some slob that you met at a bar. But I'm not the guy that can tell you that because, immediately somebody's going to look at me and go, "You hypocrite. You went and did it yourself. I mean, what the hell were you thinking at the time?" And it's, the standard answer. Well, I wasn't thinking. So, yeah. But then again, that started the road to abortion. Do we have that conversation? Do we think about it? And did having a kid at 16 impact my life adversely? Oh yeah, absolutely. It was a freaking train wreck for 15, 20 years because of having a kid in high school and dropping out of high school and all that stuff. It completely screwed up my life. So I don't recommend it if anyone's out there listening. But, you're almost a dick for saying that, but that's the reality. I mean, if my ex had gotten an abortion for my oldest son, I mean, I can't think of that now because he's 30 some odd years old, Like I'm not going to be, to me, that's where if I go, gosh, I wish the kid had been aborted, But then what I'm saying is, we should kill this adult because he is an adult. So I know what he's turned out to be. But all I'm saying is that when you have a kid at that age, it really can screw up your life. And maybe, I don't know, man. This is where I'm going to start to get a little weird. So you can stop me if you need to.
Well,
it really does. It really does. Doesn't it come down to you like that whole when does life begin? I mean, to me, I've always struggled with the fact so if you got a sperm and it gets with the egg and then it makes this beginning process of the baby, is the beginning the sperm? Is the beginning the egg? Is the beginning the sperm with the egg? Is it when it gets, you know what I'm saying? Like at what point is it really a viable human being? So if you got an abortion at an early enough time, is it that much different from doing things to prevent a child with birth control? And I don't have an answer to that, but I have to say I've always struggled with that.
I mean, it's like it goes back to the fact that like things aren't simple. So,
right, yeah.
Even the term abortion, like people think it's just like ripping a baby out. I'm like, that's not, because if you have, I get medically fancy here because my wife talks about it. If you have an ectopic pregnancy, which is it's in the fallopian tube, and if you don't take that out, you could die. Then that's considered an abortion because you're aborting the life cycle. Yeah. So, and people don't ever consider that. And it's like, that's why you can't think simply. Like life's not simple. Nothing is simple. You don't have 2 or even 3 sides of most issues. It's like 15 plus.
Yeah.
And just, it's frustrating. And as someone that has had a lot of different life experiences, I moved to Philly. I lived in a super crappy apartment and dealt with people that were drug addicts and a crazy old Jewish lady. And it's just like, you learn things that life is not simple, and there are no simple answers for much of anything besides, what to have for dinner.
That's not simple.
Tacos.
On Tuesday.
Always tacos or Mexican or sushi. That's the three options that you can always say, and it'll be a good answer.
Well, what is the sushi situation down in the Carolinas? Because let me tell you, the Wegmans Sushi, to me, I don't even think Japan could have sushi as good as Wegmans. So I
agree.
So I think you gave up a lot when you moved out of the area where you no longer had regular access to Wegmans Sushi.
False. We have semi-regular access. The closest Wegmans is 45 minutes away. Which is
breaking my heart.
Plenty close enough.
It's not even exclusive to Western New York anymore. The heck with
I know,
Wegmans.
but they still make their sushi fresh, and it's great. And they still make their subs and pizza fresh. It's very refreshing, and I can get my Weber's mustard, my horseradish mustard, which I love dearly.
See, and I feel like that this is a plot to keep people from coming back. When you start bringing the Wegmans to them, because it was always funny how many people said to me, I tell you what I really miss about the area. It's like, it's never family, it's everything else. It's like, I miss Wegmans. Really, Wegmans? It's a freaking grocery store, Yeah,
it's weird. There's people from down here that they went to Wegmans, and there's a lady, and there's a brewery that I go to. It's like 45 minutes from me in the opposite direction of Wegmans, and she's like, "Oh, I will drive to Wegmans to get their food, especially their sushi and their subs." I'm like, "That's an hour and 45-minute drive at least from you." And she's like, "Oh, it is totally worth it. It is my new favorite grocery store." Yeah. I was like, all right. I mean, I don't want to say it's a cult, but like when you have quality of a certain degree, like you just can't beat it,
Yeah, I do it. I mean, our closest Wegmans is, I think it's 35, 40 minutes, but we don't do it every shopping cycle. We do it at least once a month, but
yeah, same here.
I'm addicted to Wegmans. But now that I know that they're in other parts of the country, I just have no excuse. My wife and I have these conversations, and I go, well, hey, can we move out of the area? I'm like, I'm really not going to miss the grandkid or the kids, but God, I can't do without Wegmans,
Yeah. And even, I mean, sushi in general. So like there's certain places that you, like I won't buy any other grocery store sushi because it's all, not good.
It doesn't look right. Tops, which is another grocery store in Western New York, which I'm sure you're familiar with, their sushi is just, and they've tried to like upgrade it and everything, but it just doesn't, I don't know, man. It seems to have like that little weird film, like it's just been sitting in the refrigerator uncovered a little bit too long. It doesn't have that really just adorable fresh look that Wegmans has in their sushi.
Yeah. Well, because they don't make it there.
Yeah. Who knows where they make it? There's probably like some little sushi plant where they're underpaying workers that don't bathe on a regular basis, where, at Wegmans they've bathed because you can see them making the sushi, for goodness sake.
They make it in Niagara Falls, the greatest city in Western New York.
Yeah, with like something they got out of the sewage plant, Hey, somebody grab that salmon that's floating to the top there and just wash it off and we'll make some sushi out of it. Fantastic.
Yeah.
It's amazing how, you see, this is where the beauty of Bagel Logic. We've talked about churches, abortions, and somehow we got to Wegmans and sushi. So it's all interrelated on some level.
Oh man. It? And there's a whole nother deep level that like in my notes, I was like, yeah, we're going to talk about this because you're like, we worked at the same job, in the banking industry. And,
yeah.
And, it was like, oh yeah, we'll get to that, Yeah. But like, it's like, I haven't talked to you and it's like, you've always been a great dude to talk to. And I enjoy your thoughts. You are one of 5 people that like I would, they always say, who would you have dinner with or whatever? and you're on my list.
Well, that's very sweet. I mean, it's very humbling, to be honest with you. And that sincerely means a lot to me. And you were always welcome to have dinner with me. My wife and I are actually very good dinner company, I think, because as crazy as I am, she can always whip out the dagger eyes and just knock me down a couple of notches that I need to be a good dinner guest. I think on my own, our wives. I think alone, I'm a little bit rough of a dinner guest. I'm not going to lie. And maybe that's why no one at my work invites me out for happy hour, or because I just ignore them and I don't want to be around them. I don't know. It's one or the other. You guess. But yeah, in all sincerity, that's very sweet to say. But again, I think with the podcast, almost everybody I've had on, I think everybody I've had on, I can't think of anybody that really falls in the outer category. I've always had the philosophy, if I've ever had a good conversation with this person, then we might as well record one that we have, because that's ultimately what it comes down to. And to touch on some of the stuff that you mentioned before, there's so many topics out there that people are afraid to discuss, or maybe they do discuss and they don't think anybody else discusses it. Because I don't think my views are all that wacky. I think if anything, they're probably more mainstream, but that just doesn't, some of them may not be societally acceptable, but it's all a gray area, and we all know it's a gray area. There's just some people that get a little more entrenched than others,
I'm all about controversy. Well, no, I shouldn't say that, because my wife would be like, "You're lying." I like discussing subjects that need to be discussed. I don't shy away from it, because I've been on both sides of a lot of different things. So
yeah,
I tend to know things. I'm not like, I don't know about a certain subject. Like I always say the jack of all trades, master of none. Like I like that because I know a lot about a lot, but nothing too crazy.
Yeah. The thing that I enjoy a lot, which may be surprising to some people, I enjoy having my mind changed, because it's revelatory. It's an interesting thing, especially as you get older, because when you get older, it really becomes more difficult to find new music that makes you excited. Mm-hmm. It's harder to just find things that you're passionate about. And, to me, if I can talk to somebody who's really passionate about a subject or a band or a food or anything, and then I can discover it through them and my mind is changed, I think that's awesome. And it's a great experience. And too often, and I was like this for a long period of time. And I remember when I was a kid, there were certain bands that you just couldn't like because they weren't cool, like Michael Bolton. I mean, how can you like Michael Bolton? He's Michael Bolton. He sucks, But I loved his music, and there was a point. It's funny. Like Michael Bolton was one of the most influential musicians in my life, which may sound weird, and it's only because he didn't represent anything that I liked in music, and he was certainly somebody that was not acceptable in my crowd. And there just came a point where I had to say,
"Oh goodness,
you know what?
Yeah.
I like Michael Bolton's music, and if you don't think that that's cool, who cares?" Like, I think it's cool. I enjoy it. Why should I spend my life worrying about, and obviously the guy has some redeeming quality as a musician because he sells records, and he's a self-deprecating guy too, which I really appreciate. He's got a pretty good sense of humor, but,
oh yeah. His Netflix Valentine special with Lonely Island. Did you ever watch that?
I have not seen it.
Oh,
I will see it now, because I'm a Michael Bolton fan.
Yeah, you know who the Lonely Island is, right? Andy Samberg, and the guys from. Have you seen Hot Rod? That movie.
Okay, so now I do think I saw him. He did some really weird cameos in that. So maybe it's been a while. I actually watched. Oh my god! When I got home late last night from a concert. I watched Old School for about the 20th time. I hadn't seen it in a long time, and I was like,
nice.
And then they had this scene, which I'm sure you've seen it, where he streaks, and it's like really early in the movie, and I'm like, man, this is like the best scene. And it was really early in the movie. And then when I got done watching it, I just was like, why the hell did this movie ever get popular? And why did I ever watch it? It's so mediocre.
It's like weird cult movies.
Yeah, strange stuff. And I've never gone streaking. I've gone skinny dipping, but that's a story for another podcast.
Oh yeah.
So anyhow, we are at the witching hour. Larry, let's wrap this all together in a nice little package in a tiny little bow. Is this everything that you'd hoped it would be and more, or was it less, or was it both? I don't know.
I feel that with our collective brains, 1 hour is way too short amount of time to.
Well, we can do this again because there's plenty of space on the card. So
the answer to life is 42.
Yeah.
Let me see what else.
That's Jackie Robinson's uniform numbers. That's where that comes from, right? It's not Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, is it?
No, definitely no.
Okay.
Yes, it could be. It could be both. I don't know what they came up with. They're British people, so. They're
British. That's right. I'm going to do an entire show with a British accent one of these days. But
okay, let's wrap it up. Life is not simple. You had the greatest podcast that doesn't talk about modern rock history, and love it or leave it. Western New York podcast edition.
There you go. Excellent. Well, Larry, thanks so much for being on the podcast, and I'll and stay on after I do the sign off, and we'll chat a little bit more on a personal level after we're done with the recording. But for those of you guys out there listening, thanks for listening. Thanks for being like Larry, and hopefully I'm in your top 20 podcasts. I mean, if I'm number 2, damn, that's really impressive. I appreciate that. And we'll keep cranking them out as long as you keep listening. And from myself and from Larry Snider III, I want to thank you for listening to the Bagel Logic podcast, and we will see you next time.